The velvet box had stayed closed for 42 years. I kept it in the same place, tucked behind an old photo album on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, wrapped in the same handkerchief my husband had once used to wipe my tears on our wedding night. The box wasn't large, just big enough to hold a simple gold band and something more, something no one but me knew was there. That ring was the first and last thing my husband, Walter, ever gave me that cost more than sentiment. We never had much, but he insisted on buying it new. No family heirloom, no pawn trinket, just a plain gold band with the tiniest engraving on the inside. Still yours, no matter what comes. It wasn't the gold I cared about, it was what the ring stood for. We had 27 good years together, Walter and I. A few hard ones, too, but they never broke us. When he died in his sleep, I folded up my grief and packed it away the same day I packed away the ring. I couldn't wear it. It felt too final. So I put it back in the velvet box, and for all these years I kept it safe. But it wasn't just the ring inside that box. Walter had left me something else, something he never wanted spoken aloud. A secret folded neatly beneath the satin lining, a document he told me to keep hidden until I knew for sure it was needed. And now, maybe it was. These days, my world is small. I get up early. I make oatmeal. I water the spider plant that hangs crookedly in the kitchen window. On Tuesdays, I take the bus to the library and borrow 2 books, one mystery, one something sweet. I write letters I never send. I bake bread no one eats. My son, Derek, moved back in last year after his second divorce. He said it would be temporary, said he needed a place to reset. What he meant was, he needed someone to cook and do his laundry while he figured out how to blame the world for his problems. He barely speaks to me now, unless it's to ask what's for dinner or why the Wi-Fi is slow. He brings home fast food wrappers and slams doors without noticing the way I flinch. Sometimes, I hear him on the phone with his friends, laughing about how lucky he is that his mom's still breathing and doesn't charge rent. Lucky. When Derek was a boy, he used to sleep on Walter's chest. I remember watching them breathe in sync on the worn-out couch, my son's small hand tangled in his father's collar. Back then, he used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them sunflowers. Now, he brings me bills I didn't make and tells me I owe him more than I've given. The truth is, he scares me a little. It's not the yelling, it's the silence, the cold shoulder. The way he watches me when he thinks I'm not looking, like he's measuring something. I never thought I'd fear my own child, but I also never thought I'd see him open my purse without asking or take my grocery money from the jar above the fridge. He's not violent, just careless. Careless with my time, my heart, my history. Tonight the house is quiet except for the clink of forks in the sink. I sit in my bedroom, the door cracked just a little. Derek is in the living room, rummaging through drawers. I hear him curse under his breath, something about needing gas money, something about stupid old women and their stash of junk. My hands find the velvet box without thinking. I pull it from the shelf, unwrap it, and hold it in my lap. It still looks the same. Black velvet, frayed edges. Hinge a little loose. I press my thumb against the top. I don't open it. I just sit there, watching through the door as my son rifles through my life, searching for something he can take. And I grip the velvet box like it's the last anchor tying me to a version of myself I once respected. He doesn't see me watching him, doesn't hear the way my breath trembles. He wouldn't care, but I do, because I know what's inside this box, and he doesn't. Not yet, not tonight, but soon. The interview didn't go well. I knew at the moment Derek walked in, didn't say hello, didn't kick off his shoes like usual. He just slammed the door and tossed his blazer onto the kitchen table like it had betrayed him. 3 buses, 2 hours, just for them to say I lack leadership presence? What the hell does that even mean? I stood at the counter peeling a soft pear, letting the silence fill in the cracks between us. I've learned that when Derek gets like this, it's better not to interrupt the performance. He isn't looking for comfort. He's looking for something to break. You know what? He snapped, spinning toward me. Maybe if I had some help around here, some actual support instead of judgment, I wouldn't have to beg strangers for work. I blinked. You're not begging. Feels like it, he said, eyes narrowed. You could have loaned me more than 100 last month, but no, you said you needed it for groceries and your medication. I do. He scoffed, arms flung wide like I'd committed fraud. You're sitting on a house that's paid off, a pension, and God knows how many knickknacks stuffed in this place that could be worth something. And I'm scraping together coins for bus fare. He started pacing then, fast, erratic. You've got that old cabinet full of dusty boxes, that weird silver tea set no one uses, and all that sentimental crap you hoard like it's gold. You think you're preserving memories. I think you're just afraid to admit you're alone. I held the paring knife a little tighter. He didn't mean it. Or maybe he did. But what caught my attention wasn't the venom in his voice. It was the moment his eyes flicked toward the bookshelf in the hallway, the one where the velvet box had been sitting just that morning. I'd moved the box back to its spot behind the photo albums after last night. My hands trembled the whole time. I hadn't opened it in years, not since Walter died. But I knew what was inside. The ring, of course, still shining, still whole, and beneath the padded lining, the paper. A folded document, yellowed only at the edges, but still sharp, still intact. I remembered the night Walter gave it to me. He'd been coughing for weeks by then, the weight melting off him like wax from a candle. Doctors called it aggressive and used words like hospice while avoiding my eyes. Walter didn't waste time on denial. He handed me the folded paper the night before he slipped into the hospital bed for good. We were sitting in the den, just the two of us, firelight dancing in his eyes. I made a decision, he said. Something small, something I want you to keep safe, just in case. I unfolded it and stared at the black print on white paper. A deed, to land I didn't even know he owned. A forested patch in Vermont, 10 acres near a state highway. It's not worth much now, he told me. But someday it might be, and I want you to have it. Hide it somewhere safe. Don't tell Derek, not unless you absolutely have to. Why not? I asked. Walter had just smiled. Because land lasts longer than good intentions, and I don't want him seeing it as an escape hatch. He needs to build something of his own. I'd promised, and I'd kept that promise until now. You're hoarding things that don't matter, Derek shouted, dragging me back to the present. We could pawn some of it. I saw that little box on the shelf the other day. What's in it? Another stupid ring. He walked out of the kitchen, brushing past me. I heard the bookshelf creak as he tugged at it. Where'd you put it? I moved it, I said. To where? That's none of your business. He turned around, his eyes dark. You think I'm stealing from you? I think you're angry, I said carefully, and angry men don't make kind decisions. Oh, give me a break, he snapped. Don't pull that poetry crap. You're just bitter. Bitter that I didn't turn out like you wanted. Bitter that Dad's gone and you're stuck with me, and now you're hiding junk in corners like it's treasure. He didn't know how close to the truth he'd stumbled. I'm not hiding junk, I said quietly. He leaned against the hallway wall, arms folded. Then what's in the damn box? I shook my head. You don't want to know. That's not your choice to make, he said. It is, I replied, because it's mine, and some things are meant to be held, not handed over. We stood in silence, two ghosts in a house that used to echo with laughter and Sunday morning jazz. He finally scoffed, pushing off the wall. Whatever. I hope the stupid thing turns to dust. Maybe then you'll realize none of it matters. As he disappeared into his room, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then I walked down the hall, opened the linen closet, and tucked the velvet box beneath a stack of worn towels. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought of Walter's last words to me. When the day comes that you doubt what's yours, hold it tighter. Don't explain it. Don't defend it. Just know that you earned it. I knew then that Derek would come back for the box, but he wouldn't find what he was looking for. Not yet. Not while I still remembered what it meant. The house was too quiet when I returned from the library. Usually, the television would be blaring or the microwave humming, Derek stretched out on the couch like a bored prince awaiting room service. But that day, nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of my bones as I stepped inside. I called out his name once. No reply. Something felt off. I set my tote bag down and walked to my bedroom. The door was ajar. I always left it closed. The first thing I noticed were the drawers, open, half pulled, one sock dangling like a flag of surrender. My jewelry box gaped open, its felt compartments picked through. My perfumes were toppled like dominoes, and a thin layer of dust had been disturbed on the bookshelf, and the velvet box gone. I stood in the middle of the room, hands trembling. For a moment, I thought maybe I had moved it myself. Maybe I was forgetting things again. Maybe I'd tucked it somewhere else for safekeeping. But no. I remembered wrapping it in the blue handkerchief and placing it beneath the towels in the linen closet just 2 days ago. I remembered thinking, this is safer here, out of sight. Only now it was nowhere. Not in the closet, not under the bed, not on the high shelf where I kept old tax records and holiday cards. Gone. I found Derek in the kitchen, hunched over a takeout container, headphones on, sauce staining his t-shirt. "Where is it?" I asked. He didn't hear me at first, or pretended not to. I pulled one headphone off his ear. "I asked you a question." "What?" He blinked, annoyed. "The velvet box," I said. "Where is it?" He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language, then he scoffed. "Oh, that thing, I tossed it. Didn't look like it had anything worth keeping." "Don't lie to me." His jaw tensed. "Okay, fine, I took it. So what? You weren't wearing the ring. It was just sitting there." I figured it was collecting dust for a reason. My mouth opened, but no words came. My chest felt too tight. He shrugged. "I needed money. I was behind on my phone bill. I got 300 for it at the pawn shop down on Briar Avenue. You want a cut?" He smiled like it was a joke. In that moment, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel betrayal. I felt small, crushed into silence by the weight of what he didn't know. It wasn't about the ring, not entirely. It was what was beneath the ring. What I had placed under the velvet lining, folded tightly and pressed flat, the notarized deed to a 10-acre plot in Vermont. The same one Walter had left me with trembling hands and final words. The same deed I'd sworn to protect until the time came. And now it was gone, not because I failed to guard it, but because my son had sold it for a phone bill and a chicken sandwich. I sat down at the kitchen table slowly, afraid my knees would give. Derek kept eating, kept scrolling, kept not caring. "Did you see anything else in the box?" I asked, voice thin. "Like what?" "Like a folded piece of paper, something old." "Something important." He narrowed his eyes, then gave a little shake of his head. "Nah, I just grabbed the ring and left the rest. The guy at the counter didn't even open it, really, just glanced and weighed it." I held onto that, clutched it like a thread in a burning house. Maybe the paper was still there, maybe there was still time, but I couldn't show my panic. Couldn't let him see that he'd taken more than gold from me, so I nodded. "All right." "That's it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "That's it." He looked suspicious for a second, like he'd expected fireworks. But when none came, he returned to his food, the matter closed in his mind. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake tracing every fold of memory, where I'd placed the document when I'd last checked on it, whether the pawn shop owner would have looked inside, or worse, thrown it away. That land wasn't just an asset. It was Walter's final gift, a safety net. A secret piece of future security he'd tucked away for me, for us, like a squirrel burying a single nut before winter. And now, for all I knew, it sat in a trash bin behind a pawn shop. Or worse, in someone else's hands entirely. I got out of bed just before dawn, washed my face, put on the gray cardigan Walter liked, and made a cup of coffee strong enough to carry me through what I had to do next. I didn't cry. There would be time for that later, once I found out the truth. Once I knew for certain whether everything I'd held onto had vanished in one careless act of desperation. But more than sadness, what I felt was this clarity. My son had stolen from me, not just a ring, but trust, history, and something his father never meant for him to have. And now, whatever came next, I would not protect him from the consequences. I didn't cry, not that night, not the next morning. I didn't scream or throw dishes or tear the house apart looking for something I already knew was gone. I just sat still. For a woman my age, stillness isn't always peace, it's self-preservation. You don't waste energy on storms that already passed. You learn to wait out the aftermath in silence, and that's what I did. I waited, thought, breathed. And then, once my hands stopped shaking, I walked to the hallway drawer and found the old, yellowing Rolodex I hadn't touched in years. Half the names had moved, some had passed, others I wasn't sure existed anymore. But one was still sharp in my memory: Mr. Charles Whitmore. Walter used to call him the only lawyer who could outquiet a judge. He was calm, kind, dangerous with a pen. He helped Walter with the initial estate paperwork before he got sick, and when Walter was dying, it was Whitmore who notarized the deed. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 15 years, but some men you never really stop trusting. The phone rang 3 times, then a voice, older but still unmistakably firm, answered. "Whitmore." "Charles," I said. "It's Joan Penner, Joan, Walter's wife." A pause, and then a warm sound, not quite a laugh, but not surprise either. "Joan," he said, "I wondered when you'd call." That stopped me cold. "You what?" "Walter told me once," he said, voice low and thoughtful. "If she ever calls, don't ask why, just listen." By the time I finished explaining, my coffee had gone cold. I told him about the velvet box, the ring, the hidden deed, and Derek, what he'd done, what he'd said. What he hadn't known, I expected disbelief, or maybe scolding, some legal jargon about evidence, proof, timelines. But instead, Charles was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Do you remember the parcel number on the deed?" I did. Walter had made me memorize it like scripture. VT 04528,917B. I heard the rustle of paper on his end, the clicking of a keyboard, then a low whistle. "Well," he said, "your late husband was a quiet genius. The land, it turned out, had been nearly worthless when Walter bought it, an unremarkable patch of Vermont forest near a forgotten exit ramp. But times had changed. A new development project, something involving ecotourism, a proposed electric highway, had made the surrounding area prime property. Zoning changes had transformed that stretch of trees into a potential commercial gold mine. Estimated current value, $4.2 million. I felt my fingers go numb around the mug. "He always said he wanted to leave me something that would grow," I whispered. Whitmore chuckled. "He planted a tree, Joan, and now it's ready for harvest." We spoke for another hour. Charles offered to help me reestablish ownership. Yes, the deed was missing, but the original notarization, including his own official stamp, was on record. The property was still listed in my late husband's trust, with me as the beneficiary. The pawn shop incident, legally, was irrelevant. Derek had no right to the contents of that box and no power over the land, unless I gave it to him, which I wouldn't, not now, not ever. "I'll get the paperwork started," Whitmore said, "but I suggest you remain quiet." "You mean don't tell Derek?" He paused. "Let him think the box was empty. Let him believe he took everything. There's power in silence." That night, I moved through the house like a ghost, tidying the kitchen, folding laundry, sweeping a floor that didn't need it. Derek came home late, reeking of cheap beer and disappointment. He mumbled something about his phone plan being restored, then disappeared into his room. I said nothing. I just stood there, in the darkened hallway, with my hand on the light switch and my thoughts in Vermont. Over the next few days, Charles and I traded documents. He emailed scanned copies of land registry records and draft forms to establish a trust in my name. We used a quiet mail service, no big legal firm, no dramatic notarizations in front of Derek. Just a woman reclaiming what was hers, just an old friend making it legal. There was one moment, though, a quiet hour between lunch and dusk when I stood in front of the linen closet again. The towels looked the same, neatly folded, soft from years of use, but there was no velvet box now, no ring, no secret. Still, I smiled, because the truth hadn't vanished, it had survived. And now it was being reborn through signatures, scans, and clauses that made sure Derek could never touch a dime of it. Charles had one final question before we ended our last call. "Do you want to leave it all to a charity?" "Not all of it," I said. "Then who?" I thought for a long moment. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'll know when I meet them." Because something told me. When the time came, I'd give it to someone who understood value, not just price. And it wouldn't be my son. He strutted in like a man who'd won something. A big cardboard box cradled in his arms, labels still on, plastic tape shining in the hallway light. Behind him, a pair of brand new sneakers squeaked on the hardwood, white soles that hadn't yet known dust or humility. "Guess who finally upgraded his entertainment situation?" Derek grinned, shoving the box onto the dining table. 50-inch flat screen, got it for a steal. I didn't answer. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and waved it. "Also paid off the data bill, unlimited everything now, and check this out." He lifted a foot. "Nike Airs, you like?" I stared at the shoes. He used to beg for hand-me-downs when he was 10. Now he walked like the floor belonged to him. I nodded slowly. "Nice." He leaned back in the chair with a crooked smile, sipping a soda that hadn't come from my fridge. "Man, that pawn guy didn't even blink. I told him the ring was real gold and he gave me cash on the spot. Didn't even open the box all the way. Probably thought I was fencing stolen jewelry." He laughed, loud and harsh. "Good thing he didn't check inside, huh?" My hand clenched around the handle of the sugar bowl. Just for a second, he kept going. "You really didn't keep anything else in there, right? No secret treasure, no ancient coins or love letters." He winked. "Just the ring and that faded piece of paper or whatever." My heart stuttered. He didn't know. He thought that folded paper was meaningless. He had seen it, held it in his hands maybe, but thought so little of it that he never even asked what it was. I offered him a tight smile. "Nothing important." He grinned wide and pointed at me with the soda can. "Knew it. All that fuss over nothing. I told you, Mom, sentimental junk. He tossed the can into the sink, missing completely, and wandered down the hall. His voice echoed back toward me. Don't worry, I'll be out of your hair soon. Once I land this next job, you can have your little quiet house back. And then he laughed again. It wasn't the laugh that broke me. It was the certainty in his voice, the way he spoke like a man who believed he'd won. He thought he was clever, thought he'd taken the only thing that mattered to me, thought I was just a frail old woman with fading memories and no teeth left to bite, and I let him think that, because silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the lights were off, just the hum of the refrigerator and the moonlight creeping through the blinds. In my lap, I held a notepad, the thick, leather-bound one Walter had once used to jot down real estate leads. I flipped to a blank page and started making a list. To do: finalize Vermont land transfer, file copies of updated deed with county contact Charles about revoking previous, will draft new will. Exclude Derek, look into legacy funds or charitable trusts. Each checkmark felt like a thread pulled tight. Not rage, not even revenge, just a shift in gravity, a settling of weight where it belonged. I thought about Walter. How he always knew things before they happened, not in a mystical way, but in the quiet, observing way only good men possess. And I remembered what he said one winter night, long before he got sick. Derek had been in high school, sullen and sarcastic, always pushing boundaries but never accepting blame. Walter and I had fought that night, our only big fight. I keep making excuses for him, I said, because he's our son. Walter had looked at me over the rim of his mug and said, he'll show his true colors one day, Joni. And when he does, don't wait to protect yourself. Don't wait for love to become permission. I had hated that line, but now I understood it. I opened the drawer in the hutch and pulled out the small metal tin where I kept my most recent copy of the will, drawn up 10 years ago, back when I still believed Derek would turn things around. His name was all over it: executor, beneficiary, sole heir. I ran my fingers over the paper. The ink had started to fade, so had my faith. The next day, I called Charles Whitmore again. Charles, I said, voice steady, we need to rewrite the will. He didn't ask why, he just said, when do you want to begin? I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the fading garden. Derek was outside on the porch, scrolling his phone, looking smug. He had no idea. He had taken what he thought was treasure, pawned it for pennies, and laughed in my face. But the real inheritance, the future Walter and I built together, that was never his to take. And now, legally and spiritually, it never would be. It appeared on the kitchen counter one morning as if it had never left. No note, no apology, no fanfare, just sitting there, slightly scuffed, velvet dulled with age, the brass hinge loose like an old joint. The velvet box. I stared at it for a long while, afraid to breathe too loud, like it might vanish again if I blinked. I didn't touch it, not yet. From the hallway, I heard Derek clear his throat. I brought it back, he said, avoiding my eyes. The box. I nodded slowly. I see that. He shrugged, trying to sound casual. I bought it back from the shop. Cost me a little more than what I got for it, if you can believe that. His tone carried the weight of forced generosity, like I was supposed to be grateful he'd restored something he never should have taken. I felt bad, all right, he added. Didn't know it meant so much to you? I said nothing, because I knew the truth. He didn't bring it back out of remorse. He brought it back out of fear. Somewhere deep inside that selfish heart of his, Derek had finally started to wonder if the box was worth more than gold. Maybe he remembered the folded paper. Maybe he started to question what was under that velvet lining. And maybe, just maybe, he realized that if he took something of value and left me with nothing, I might finally cut him off. Not emotionally, financially, legally, permanently. He pushed the box toward me, then leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. You can stop acting like I murdered someone, he said. It was just a ring. I reached forward and slowly opened the lid. Empty, no gold band, no folded paper, just the faint imprint in the lining where they had once lain side by side like two secrets holding hands. I ran my finger across the fabric, letting the silence stretch between us. I appreciate you returning it, I said softly. He blinked, caught off guard by my calm. You're not mad. I was, I said, but I've moved on. And I had. Because what he didn't know, what he would never know, was that I had scanned the deed over a decade ago, saved digital copies on a flash drive tucked in my knitting basket, filed official claims on the land with Charles last week. The paper could burn, the ring could disappear, but the ownership was no longer in question. The secret he thought he stole was already secured. He hovered, unsure what to say next. Well, he muttered. I did the right thing, that should count for something. I smiled, tight, unreadable. It does. He watched me for a beat longer, then rolled his eyes and left the kitchen. Moments later, the front door slammed shut behind him. I stayed where I was, eyes still fixed on the box. Then I picked it up with both hands, carefully, tenderly, and carried it into the living room. I placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, right beside the photo of Walter and me in Vermont. We were younger then, tired from hiking, laughing at nothing, his arm around my shoulder like it belonged there. The velvet box looked small beside us, but it had once held our entire future. Now it held nothing. And that was fitting. Because Derek hadn't just emptied the box, he'd emptied the space I once held for him in my plans, in my legacy, in my love, and he didn't even realize it. The mantel caught the late afternoon light. A beam of sun fell across the velvet lid, warming it like a benediction. I thought of Walter again. The time will come, Joni, and when it does, you won't need to scream, you'll just need to stand tall. I was standing now, not in defiance, not in sorrow, but in clarity. Later that evening, I lit a candle beneath the photo, just for Walter, just to say thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me time. Thank you for planting seeds instead of promises. The house was quiet, no footsteps, no shouting, no tension, just me, and the velvet box. And the echo of a woman who finally understood that silence wasn't weakness. It was will. It came on a Thursday, slipped into the mailbox between the usual grocery flyers and the utility bill. The envelope was thick, ivory-colored, sealed with gold foil at the flap, raised embossing that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. No return address, but I didn't need one. My hands didn't shake, not this time. I stepped inside, set the envelope on the kitchen table, and made a fresh cup of tea before opening it. No rush. Not anymore. When I slit the seal open with the same letter opener Walter used to keep on his desk, a single sheet slid out, smooth cardstock, official letterhead at the top. Mrs. Joan Penner, we are pleased to inform you that the full transfer of the property listed under parcel VT 045 28917B has been finalized. Per your request, all sale proceeds have been deposited into the Whitmore Family Living Trust. Total net amount, $4,216,700.00. Thank you for your continued trust in our services. Sincerely, Charles H. Whitmore-esque. The paper crinkled softly as I folded it, my thumb tracing the ink like it might fade if I blinked. 4.2 million. For trees. For dirt. For patience. For the promise Walter had made me when the world was falling apart. Someday, you'll need a way out, and I'll make sure there's a road waiting. He had made good on that promise. Now it was my turn. I didn't tell Derek. Of course not. He breezed through the kitchen an hour later on his way to meet a friend. He barely glanced at the envelope sitting beside my tea. You get another coupon packet? He asked, snatching a banana from the bowl without slowing down. I smiled. Something like that. He didn't wait for a reply, just waved the fruit behind him and disappeared out the door. I stared at that door for a long time after it shut. The next morning I called Charles. I want to establish a fund, I said. Something real, something with purpose. He didn't need details, he just asked for a name. The Whitmore Legacy Fund, I said. For Walter, in his memory. I heard him smile through the line. What kind of fund? I knew exactly what kind. Scholarships. For single mothers trying to go back to school after raising children alone. For elderly women who needed help starting over after being widowed, discarded, or ignored. For women like me, women who had been counted out, women who still had something to give. Charles helped me set up the accounts, the paperwork, the non-profit registration. He recommended a small community foundation to manage the disbursements. I wrote a personal letter for the fund's mission statement on blue stationery in cursive. This fund is for the women who were told their best years were behind them. It is for those who gave everything and were left with nothing. It is for those who dared to believe they were not finished yet. I didn't tell anyone. Not the neighbors, not the pastor, certainly not Derek. He still stomped through the house like a king, unaware that the kingdom had shifted beneath him. Still tossed his laundry at the foot of the stairs. Still mocked me for saving receipts and clipping coupons. Still laughed when I asked him to return library books on time. He thought he'd taken the only thing of value I had. He didn't know that I had turned his theft into a legacy. One afternoon, I walked downtown and visited the little print shop near the bank. I asked them to make a plaque, nothing grand, just bronze on wood, clean lettering. The Whitmore Legacy Fund established 2025 for every woman told she had nothing left to offer. I didn't hang it in the house. I had it delivered to the foundation's office in Vermont, where the trees once stood, where Walter's land had become something more than property. It had become possibility. A few days later, I received a letter from a young woman named Callie. She'd been selected as the first scholarship recipient. She wrote, "I'm 33 years old, a single mother of two. I never finished college. I thought I was too late. This fund reminded me that I'm still worth investing in. Whoever you are, thank you." I cried, not from sadness, but from the quiet, steady joy of watching a stolen thing become a seed. Derek still didn't notice. He spent his days scrolling job listings and his nights glued to the new TV. Sometimes he'd ask if I had any cash for gas. Sometimes he'd grumble about how tight things were. I always gave him exactly what he gave me: silence. He didn't ask about the velvet box again. He didn't notice the framed photo of Walter I'd moved to the mantel, right beside the empty box, now polished, dusted, centered. He didn't ask why I smiled more, or why I sang to myself when folding laundry, or why I'd started writing again, poems and essays I didn't plan to publish, just words that felt like breathing, because he wasn't looking. And for once I was glad, because the woman he thought he'd beaten, she wasn't here anymore. In her place stood someone new, someone strong, someone with $4.2 million in quiet, purposeful power, and a future that no one, not even her own son, could ever steal again. I made pot roast, with carrots, baby red potatoes, pearl onions, and just a splash of red wine in the broth. It was his favorite. I pulled out the good dishes, white porcelain with blue trimming, and set the table for two. Napkins folded, candles lit. Not for romance, but for ritual. Music played softly in the background. Ella Fitzgerald, same as the records Walter used to play on lazy Sundays. And when Derek walked through the door and smelled the food, he paused, actually paused, like some buried memory stirred behind his eyes. "You're cooking," he said, eyebrows raised. I smiled gently. "Your birthday's coming up. Thought I'd treat you early." He tilted his head, suspicious, but the smell got to him. He shrugged off his jacket, pulled out a chair, and sat. We didn't talk much during dinner. I let him eat in peace, savoring each bite like it was the first warm meal he'd had in months, though he never once said thank you. But I didn't need thanks. I didn't need apology. I needed this moment. Quiet. Calm, the eye of the storm before the final gust. After dessert, chocolate cake from scratch, the same recipe I used when he turned 10. I poured us both coffee and reached into the drawer. I slid a single envelope across the table. White, plain, light. He glanced at it, then at me. "What's this?" "An early birthday card." He rolled his eyes, but smirked. "Is there money in it?" I smiled. "Sort of." He opened it casually, expecting a check, maybe a crisp 20. Instead, he found a single note tucked inside a blank greeting card with faded balloons. He read it once, then again. "You stole a box. I kept the key. Goodbye," he snorted. "Cryptic. Is this some kind of old lady fortune cookie?" I sipped my coffee. "You've been watching too many mystery shows," he said, tossing the card on the table. "Or maybe you've finally lost it." I didn't answer. He stood, stretched, and gathered his plate. "Appreciate the dinner, I guess. Let me know if you want help with dishes tomorrow." Then he left. No hug, no questions, no curiosity. He'd missed the point completely, but the point wasn't him. It was me. The envelope wasn't meant to explain. It was meant to end. The next day, I went about my morning routine as usual, tea crosswords, a short walk to the library. I had errands to run and calls to make, one to the foundation to finalize this quarter's scholarship recipients, another to Charles to discuss the property in Maine we'd quietly acquired for expansion. By noon, I was back home with groceries and a renewed sense of breath in my lungs. That's when Derek came back. And this time, he was holding the card. "What does this mean?" he demanded, standing in the kitchen like a dog denied a bone. I looked up from slicing apples. "It means," I said calmly, "you underestimated me." He threw the card on the counter. "You're playing games now?" "No," I said, "I'm finishing them." "Is this about the ring?" he scoffed. "Because I brought the box back." I tilted my head. "You think that was the point?" He narrowed his eyes. What did I miss? Everything, I thought, but I didn't say it. Instead, I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked past him, and gently opened the cabinet where I'd tucked away the last copy of my new will. I placed it on the counter beside the card. He glanced down, saw the lawyer's name, the fresh date, the clear exclusion of his name from everything. His face shifted, slowly, like a cloud realizing it's not going to rain after all. "You cut me out," he whispered. "I released you," I said. "The moment you pawned what you didn't understand, you made your decision, and I made mine." He laughed again, but it didn't reach his eyes this time. "You think I care about some stupid deed and charity project?" "No," I said. "I think you care about control, and you just lost it." He stormed out again. No threats, no slurs, just silence, a different kind of silence. One that knew. Later that evening, I walked past the mantel and glanced at the velvet box, still there, still empty. But in its emptiness, it now held everything I had reclaimed: my name, my voice, my future, and peace. He left skid marks on the pavement when he pulled out of the driveway. I didn't hear it, of course. I was already gone by then. But the neighbor told me later, said Derek peeled off like the house was on fire. Maybe in a way it was. The pawn shop sat on the edge of Briar Avenue, nestled between a laundromat and a vape store, its yellow sign missing a letter. The kind of place where desperation changes hands every hour on the hour. Derek shoved the door open, bell jingling wildly as he stormed inside. The man behind the counter, late 50s, reading a crumpled sports section, didn't flinch. "Help you?" "You bought a ring from me a few weeks ago," Derek snapped. "Gold band, small, came in a velvet box." "Do you still have it?" The man blinked, took his time folding the paper. "Don't remember, got a lot of gold bands." "It was in a black velvet box," Derek insisted, hands tightening into fists. "There was something else inside, a piece of paper, a deed." That made the man pause. "Oh, that one," he said. "Yeah, I remember the box, bit frayed. Had a piece of paper under the lining, looked old. Nothing official, just some property record or whatever, tossed it." Derek's throat went dry. "You what?" "We tossed it," the man repeated, unbothered. "Didn't look valuable. No seal, no signature, probably just sentimental junk." Derek's heart thundered. "It was real," he whispered. "It was worth something." The man gave a half shrug. "Well, it's gone now." Derek stumbled outside into the blinding daylight. His palms were sweating. His stomach twisted into something tight and sour. The world around him blurred. Horns honked. Someone yelled. A dog barked. He didn't hear any of it. He could only hear those words. "We tossed it," over and over. He'd thrown away millions. A future, a legacy, a lifeline, and he had no one to blame but himself. He sped back to the house, tires screeching into the driveway. The porch light was off. The curtains drawn. He burst inside, calling her name. "Mom, Mom." Nothing. He checked the kitchen, the living room, her bedroom, empty, the closet, no clothes, the drawers neatly cleared. On the dining table sat a single envelope, plain and unsealed. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her new address. A retirement community in the mountains, no note, no goodbye, just a forwarding location like any other practical mail. And below that, clipped to the bottom, he hadn't seen it at first, was a newspaper article. Whitmore Legacy Fund launches $4.2 scholarship program for women in need. Founder declines interview. "Let the work speak for itself," her statement reads. Derek sat down in the nearest chair. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat there, head in his hands, because for the first time in his life he understood. And me. By then I was already unpacking my books on the second floor of Sunvale Ridge, where the hallways smelled like cedar and the windows opened to mountain air. My new room had a small fireplace, an armchair, and just enough light for afternoon reading. On the mantel, I placed a framed photo of Walter. Beside it, nothing. Not the velvet box. I left that behind. I had no more use for it. The box was empty, but I wasn't. Not anymore. The air smelled like pine needles and rain. Sunvale Ridge wasn't fancy, at least not in the way some retirement homes advertise, but it had something better: quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just calm. Like the house is holding its breath, but in a good way. My room sat on the second floor, facing the lake. The windows opened wide, and if you listened close enough in the early morning, you could hear ducks waddling near the reeds. It was mine, paid for in full, up front. No one co-signed, no one hovered, no one called me Mom. The name on the welcome paperwork was Joan Whitmore. No hyphen, no fuss, just a small nod to the man who saw me long before I ever saw myself. The receptionist had smiled when she handed me my key. Welcome home, Mrs. Whitmore, I smiled back. It's good to be here. She didn't ask about children, no one did, and I didn't offer. I spent the first week unpacking slowly, one book at a time, one picture frame, one memory folded carefully into its proper drawer. On the small bookshelf near the window, I placed the velvet box, still empty, still soft to the touch, still edged in time. But now, it didn't feel like a symbol of loss. It felt like proof of all I had survived, of what I had let go, and what I had rebuilt from ashes no one else even saw burning. I started volunteering at the community center across the street on Wednesday afternoons. Art classes, mostly, finger painting and collage with women twice my age and half my confidence. We'd sit in a circle with our brushes and colored paper, trading stories while our hands stayed busy. They didn't ask about husbands or sons or inheritance. They asked about color, about texture, about how to make a landscape look less lonely. Use more yellow, I told them. Even the saddest sky softens with a little yellow. One of the women, Helen, 81 with perfectly sculpted white curls, told me I had a teacher's heart. I thanked her and tucked the compliment in my pocket like a pebble I wanted to keep. There was no television in my room. I didn't want one. Instead, I kept a small record player and a stack of old jazz records. Most evenings, I'd play Ella or Nina or Sarah Vaughan, then sit on the little balcony with tea and watch the water catch the sunset. No one texted me. No one barged in demanding groceries or shouting about missed opportunities. Just ducks and distant laughter from the courtyard, and peace. Sometimes the younger volunteers asked about my past. Were you a teacher? No, I said, but I taught. Were you ever married? Yes, I said, to a man who saw gold in dirt and love in silence. They always smiled. They didn't press. No one asked about Derek, and I never brought him up. The Whitmore Legacy Fund had already helped 3 women enroll in programs by then, 2 mothers, 1 widow. All of them had written thank you notes to the foundation. I kept copies folded in a drawer beneath my knitting yarn. They didn't know who I was. They didn't need to. The work spoke louder than the past ever could. One evening, I stood by the bookshelf and opened the velvet box again, just once. I ran my fingers along the lining, still soft, still hollow. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. Instead, I whispered, "We did it, Walter." And for a moment, the room felt warmer. I left the box open that night, not as a shrine, not as a warning, but as a reminder that even an empty vessel can still hold purpose. That what's taken from you doesn't define you, what you do after it does. The morning I went to the cemetery, the sky was clear, sharp blue, like someone had scrubbed the clouds clean overnight. The mountains were quiet, but not still. There was movement in the trees, birdsong in the distance, and just enough breeze to remind me I was alive. I wore Walter's old cardigan, the one I'd patched at the elbows years ago. It still smelled faintly of cedar and old tobacco. The velvet box sat wrapped in a linen handkerchief inside my bag. His grave rested beneath a sugar maple tree, its branches heavy with turning leaves. I hadn't been back in months, not because I didn't care, but because I'd been too full of noise, of plans, of grief I hadn't wanted to admit still pulsed in me like an old bruise, but today felt different. Like an exhale I'd waited a decade to release. I knelt beside his headstone and traced the letters carved into stone. Walter Whitmore Penner, beloved husband, builder of quiet roads, 1949, 2001, builder of quiet roads. I'd insisted on that line when they asked what to write, because that's what he was. Not just a contractor or investor, but a man who always saw the long path, the unseen turns, the roads that led somewhere better, even when the map didn't exist yet. I pulled out the box, black velvet, edges worn, hinge delicate. I hadn't opened it since Sunvale Ridge, and I didn't now. It wasn't about what was inside anymore. It was about what it had carried and what I had chosen to carry instead. I placed it gently on the stone, just above his name, no fanfare, no speech, just a whisper, low and steady, "You were right." He wasn't ready, but I was. I stayed there a long time, watching the wind stir the grass, listening to the leaves clap against one another in secret applause, feeling the weight of everything that had passed through my life, loss, betrayal, resilience, and now release. I didn't cry. There was nothing to grieve anymore, only memory. And memory, when honored, doesn't ache, it softens. I thought about all the moments I could have shouted, slammed doors, demanded to be heard. I'd chosen none of them. I'd chosen silence, stillness, strategy. I'd chosen to outlive the insult, and in doing so, I had taken everything back without ever raising my voice. Dignity over drama, that was Walter's gift. And now it was mine too. As I stood to leave, I took one last look at the velvet box, still sealed, still secret, still mine, and then I turned and walked away. I didn't tell anyone I'd left it there. Not the caretaker, not the women at the art center, certainly not Derek. If he ever came looking, he'd find a tombstone and silence. He'd find no trail to follow. No treasure map, just what I left behind, a box that once held everything and now held only the weight of what he never understood. He thought he took everything, the ring, the paper, the power, but I never gave him the one thing that mattered, the truth. And now it's buried where it belongs. If this story touched something deep in you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly replaced, then you know the power of rising without a sound. I tell stories like this every week of women who have been pushed aside and chose not to scream, but to outgrow, outlast, and reclaim. So if you felt something here, don't just click away. Subscribe because your story matters too, and next time it might be the one I tell.